Hi everybody and welcome to Heel Heat. My name is George Coles, and on this episode we're doing a special edition of Who Was Better. The topic for this Who Was Better? Two horror icons that have been in books, movies, and anything else you could think of. And before we get into it, I'm going to take off this mask because you're probably having trouble hearing me with it on, and to be perfectly honest, it's really hard to breathe with this. It's not really made for breath holes, but I digress. But it's still a cool Wyatt Family Eric Rowan mask, which apparently I got back in 2013. I didn't realize I've had it that long, but I digress. So the icons we're going to cover today are Frankenstein's monster, aka Frankenstein. For brevity and ease, we're just going to call him Frankenstein here. Yes, I know it's Frankenstein's monster. Yes, I know when I put the poll out, spoiler, we'll talk about that in a moment, that there was at least 3 or 4 people that had to point out, it's not Frankenstein, it's Frankenstein's monster. I get it, nerds. I know, I've watched the movies, I've read the books. Everybody just calls him Frankenstein. Just suck it up, Buttercup. And we're gonna go with Dracula. The reason I picked these guys is, as you can see, both have had tremendous impact basically for over a century, and in some cases, even longer. I'm a big fan of the Universal horror movies, Dracula, Frankenstein, The Mummy, The Invisible Man, all that stuff. So these are 2 of my favorite characters from that genre. They've been in everything from silly cartoons, to serious movies, to books, to comic books, and everything in between. So we're going to break it down. We have 8 categories for these guys, as we do normally on our Who Was Better video. These are going to be more tailored for these guys instead of what we normally do. There is still a chance for 5 bonus points, and we'll talk about that when we get there. But before we get into the breakdown, I want to kick it over to Promotional George, and he wants to tell you about something. Go ahead, George. Thanks, George. Nevermore the Raven Effect is a documentary film about the professional wrestler Raven. The film explores his tortured genius, pain, and brilliance, influenced the extreme wrestling scene of the 1990s, particularly in ECW. It features interviews with Raven himself and other wrestling legends like Chris Jericho and Tommy Dreamer, along with ECW standouts like The Sandman and musical geniuses like Billy Corgan, chronicling the chaotic and brutal era of wrestling and its physical and emotional toll on those involved. You get a chance to see behind the scenes on one of the most compelling and interesting characters and minds in the history of pro wrestling. I highly recommend you watch this movie. It's being brought to us by Night School Films and the acclaimed documentary director Jordy Day. This promises to be one of the quintessential documentaries of pro wrestling, and definitely one of the quintessential characters in pro wrestling. One of the guys who made an indelible mark on the sport, doesn't quite get the credit he deserves, but maybe now we could see behind the mirror, behind the magic, Raven. Definitely check this out. November 18th, Nevermore the Raven Effect, Amazon Prime, Google Play, Apple TV, and Vudu. Now back to George. Thank you so much, George. With that being said, I hope you go see that movie. Let's get back into 2 movie icons, in my opinion, 2 of the people that I think really made the movies what they are, and that's Frankenstein and Dracula. So we're going to jump into their first category, strength. This is basically, the power, overwhelmingness of each of the 2. For Frankenstein, I'm giving him a 5. I mean, come on. It's what he is. He's a big, basically mindless brute, although in some depictions he does eventually get a brain, which is interesting because when he gets a brain, then he's played by Lugosi, who plays Dracula. It's a whole thing. If you know, you know. But anyway, I'm going to give Frankenstein a 5. I mean, come on, it's obvious. This is kind of what, like, your slasher villains would be based on, the unrelenting waves of just powerful strikes. And if I didn't say it in the beginning, I do grade everything on a 1 to 5 scale, 1 being the worst, 5 being the best. Going over to Dracula, I'm going to give Dracula a 4. While Dracula has superhuman strength, he's never really portrayed that as one of his main assets. He's used it. There have been plenty of movies and plenty of media where he's had to overpower people, but for the most part, he uses his charm and his wit and his hypnosis. So for that, I'm going to give Dracula a 4. Now coming off of that, attacks, basically what it sounds like. For Frankenstein, I'm going to give him a 4. I'll probably just call him Frank from here out. I'm going to give Frankenstein a 4. While I do think His attacks are powerful and his strength is off the charts. His slow-moving and prodding nature make it easier to miss. When he hits you, he's going to absolutely destroy you. But the thing is, a brisk jog gets you away from him in most depictions. Now for Dracula's going to get a 5. Dracula could sneak up on you. Dracula can overpower you, like I just said. He can hypnotize you. Basically, there's no real good way of getting out of a Dracula attack. He's going to come at you. He's going to get you if he wants to. Now going from that, their villainous aura. For Frankenstein, I'm going to give him a 3. And the reason why I say this, even though people are scared of him, most depictions of Frankenstein portray him as kind of a misunderstood villain. He's not necessarily an out-and-out menace. He's just someone that's misunderstood because obviously what he is, he's basically a zombie brought back to life. And that's where it comes in. And for that, people are scared of him, but I also think the empathy to him has to bring this down a little bit. Now for Dracula gets a 5. Like I said, everything he does is just terrifying. If it's the night, well, that's the one thing to caveat, his weaknesses. If you play into his weaknesses, either of these guys, he can get past it. But let's say it's midnight. He can turn into a bat so he can fly and catch up with you if you're outrunning him. He can teleport in most cases or some cases. Again, he can hypnotize you so you just basically stay stone cold and he'll come and do his attack, which most of the time is a bite on the neck to turn you into a vampire or for him to feed. So for that, I mean, he has the aura of being an inevitable thing. That's why he gets a 5. Next up, this is something we were just kind of touching on there, sympathy. And what I mean by that is which character or how do the characters get a sympathetic response from? How do you relate to them? Are these characters that you actually root for in some cases? For Frankenstein, I'm going to give Frank a 5. Again, it's when you read the story, especially if you read the book, you feel that kind of connection to him. And you feel that kind of almost sense of loneliness that he has. And that he's one of one and that he can't have real friendships or real relationships because people are scared of him. So you sympathize with him. It makes you kind of cheer for him. Now for Dracula, I'm going to give Dracula a 3. There are some depiction of Dracula where he's a little bit more altruistic. He's not straight up a villain trying to turn everybody and suck everybody's blood. However, for the most part, he's kind of a narcissistic vampire that's out for himself. So while there is some sympathy in the fact of some depictions and how they tell his story about him just being not able to have anybody to connect with, much like Frankenstein, but in a way that he's going to live past anybody he makes friends with and all that stuff and his own stuff. So I can't give him very low. I'll give him right at the middle, giving him a 3. I don't think he's very sympathetic, but he is sympathetic to some, and especially in some depictions. Next category, monologue. Normally this is where we put in wrestling promos, but hey, like I said, this is when it's different. We're going to talk about the monologues here. Now for Frankenstein, for most of his depictions, he does not talk. There are a couple films, one where he gets a brain put in him and he gets to talk, and that's the one where Karloff portrays him, which I actually don't think that the talking version of the movie is available still. It's one of those movies that's kind of been lost to time. I believe, if I'm right, and I might be mixing up the different movies because there's a bunch of them. That's also the movie where he does a Frankenstein walk that everybody assumes is his walk and has been adapted ever since. But there's a chunk of that story where the reason he's doing that is because the brain that was put into him was blind. He can't see, that's why he's doing that. But anyway, I digress. We're going a little bit too far into the lore here for just a silly little video that I'm making basically for Halloween. So for monologue, I'm going to give Frank a 2. Like I said, for most of the movies, he just growls and grunts. Most of his depictions are that way. Can't give him much more than that, even though it's iconic and we all know him that way. That's why he doesn't get a 1, but can't give him much more if he ain't saying nothing. For Dracula gets a 5. It's part of Dracula's charm. Dracula can talk you into doing things you don't want to do, and he doesn't necessarily have to hypnotize you. He's kind of, in my opinion, portrayed as somewhat of a Lothario or somewhat of a gigolo or something somebody that can just talk his way into women's lives. And you see that in most of the depictions you see. He has that aura. He has that capability. So again, I gotta give him a 5. Now roll into our next category, presentation. Both these guys are getting a 5. If you've never seen a Dracula movie, a Frankenstein movie, a Frankenstein comic book, a Dracula comic book, a book, a TV show that had him in it, if I walk up to people on the street and I just say Frankenstein and Dracula, they automatically, instantly get into their heads and know what they look like. These are two characters that are in the zeitgeist and everybody is universally known. It's kind of like Darth Vader. I guess Homer Simpson, you could say, would be another one. Maybe Mario. If you say their name, people know who they are, know what they look like, and they may not have even ever seen a movie or read the books or anything. So for that, they get a 5 for presentation. I mean, there's a reason why all these years later we keep adapting these same characters and making movies about these same characters and making books and stories about them, because their presentation is so iconic. Next up, charisma. For Frankenstein, Frankie's getting a 3. Again, it's his portrayal. I mean, for most of his portrayal, he's just a lunk. So I can't really give him much more than that. For Dracula, again, he gets a 5. I've talked about it on several of these. His ability to talk people into doing what they do. He's very charismatic. He's very, how should I say, suave or debonair. He's someone in the portrayals that comes off as someone you want to be around, as like a star. He has that aura, that it factor. As the kids would say today, he has Riz. So for that, he gets a 5. Now our last category, last but not least, overall cultural impact. I'm giving both these guys a 5. I mean, again, it goes back to, if I stop 10 people on the street and I say, do you know who Frankenstein is? Do you know who Dracula is? 10 out of 10 are going to say yes. You'd be hard-pressed to find a person that doesn't know both of these characters or at least one of these two characters. They are so iconic, they've crossed over into everything. I've mentioned that there's been songs about them, there have been movies, books, countless adaptations, cartoons have them in there. I mean, anything that you could think of has Frankenstein and has Dracula. And it'll probably be that way until there's no more planet Earth and our history goes away. But I digress. They have a deep cultural impact. They're well-known characters. I put them up there with some of the best-known characters in any kind of fiction that there is. I mean, could you honestly say that you believe 150 years from now, Harry Potter's still going to be a known character? He might be, might not. Is John Wick still going to be popular that long? Probably not. Probably going to be long forgotten and probably had 10 different remakes made of him by then. These guys are in the zeitgeist as long as media is made, whether it be YouTube videos, whether it be TikTok, there's always going to be something coming. Now with that being said, let's total them up. For Frankenstein, Frankenstein gets a total of 32. For Dracula, Dracula's getting a total of 37. But wait, here is that bonus that I talked about in the beginning. I put a poll out every Wednesday on my posts page here on YouTube, basically asking you guys who's better of the two. And you get to vote. The vote winner gets 5 bonus points. The winner of the poll was Dracula. It was actually close. I believe it ended up being 57% to 43% when I checked it before making this video. So yeah, I mean, it might change because with those things, unless I just delete them, which I don't like to do, I like the people to be able to go back and see them. If you vote after, it may change it. But anyway, I digress. As of the time of making the video, Dracula got the win for the bonus points, giving him the overall win at 42 to 32. I do think it's closer. I understand why Dracula got the bonus. I mean, in my breakdown, he wins because he's got a little bit of advantage. Again, these are two of the most iconic villains in history. The Mummy, the Invisible Man, even newer ones that have become iconic now, like Jason and Freddy Krueger, Michael Myers, the Xenomorph, I guess if you call that a horror icon. Just two of the most well-known and most famous horror villains. That's why I kind of had to put them in. Now, since this is my Halloween special, I know by the time this comes out, some places have already done their trick-or-treating, which is weird because when I was a kid, we always did Halloween trick-or-treating on the day of Halloween. If you're going out trick-or-treating or you're going out to Halloween parties, be safe, be careful, watch out for the ones that are littler than you. Try to make sure they're safe and careful as well. Be kind to each other. Have fun. And with all that being said, my name is George Coles, and you've been watching Who Was Better.